Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Georgetown University. My name is Michelle Semitkowski, and I work here at the university in the Office of Mission and Ministry, where I serve students, faculty, and staff on programs and initiatives that deepen and enhance our Catholic and Jesuit mission and values, not only for the lives here at Georgetown on our campus, but also for the world at large. I came here to Georgetown actually as a freshman in 1988 and have never left. I've been working and studying here for over 25 years. So if that says something about how powerful and significant Georgetown is, I think you could understand why. It's a place where faith matters and questions of faith matter. And therefore, it's my true privilege and honor to welcome you here, not only on behalf of Georgetown, but also the following co-sponsors for our event this afternoon: the Initiative on Catholic Social Thought and Public Life at Georgetown, Crossroads Cultural Center, and the Fraternity of Comunione and Liberation. This afternoon, I love the joyful noises of children. I truly do. This afternoon, we have the extraordinary opportunity to hear Archbishop Christophe Pierre, Papal Nuncio to the United States, Father Julián Carrón, the global leader of the Catholic movement Comunione and Liberation, and Initiative Director John Carr discuss the countercultural message of Disarming Beauty and how it relates to the mission of Pope Francis. Together, we will explore how faith is more relationship and encounter than a body of thought. What freedom means in our church, our society, and our lives. What it means to be human, and how to protect and enhance human life and dignity today. What new paths there are for believers in areas of family, work, education, and politics, and how to understand and overcome divisions, conflict, violence, and despair with love, justice, and beauty. It is fitting that we should have this conversation here at Georgetown, the oldest Catholic and Jesuit university in our country, where Christ is at the center of our mission and values. From its inception, Georgetown has always been committed to promoting faith that does justice, interreligious understanding, respectful dialogue, and cura personalis, Latin for care of the person, where we truly love and respect the dignity of every human being as exquisite and beautiful creatures of God. These values, which we celebrate here at Georgetown, mirror the vision and spirit of Disarming Beauty. For as Father Carrón writes, think of reality first as beautiful and only later as good and true. Also, he writes, it is the recurrence of the Christian event that reopens the human being to self-discovery and allows intelligence of faith to become the intelligence of reality, so that Christians can offer an original and meaningful contribution by bringing to life those convictions that can be introduced into the human community. Indeed, what a privilege it is to reflect together this afternoon on our intentional and significant contributions that we must make to our world today. Before we move to our panel, I'd like to say a few words now on the Initiative of Catholic Social Life and Public Life, Catholic Social Thought and Public Life, and introduce our moderator. Now in its 5th year, the initiative has organized more than 30 gatherings attended by more than 14,000 people and has become a respected place of dialogue on the applications of Catholic social thought to key national and global issues. It hopes to encourage a new generation of Catholic lay leaders to become salt, light, and leaven in public life. The initiative strives to be a vital sign of Georgetown's Catholic and Jesuit identity in action. So please be sure to pick up one of our new brochures, which outlines and highlights some of our latest events and our mission. Our moderator this afternoon will be the director of the initiative, Mr. John Carr. Prior to founding and directing the initiative, John served for over 20 years as director of the Department of Justice, Peace, and Human Development at the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, held a residential fellowship at the Institute of Politics at Harvard University during 2012-2013, and previously served as executive director of the White House Conference on Families and as director of the National Committee for Full Employment. As we turn our attention to our distinguished panel, I'd also like to remind you, please, to silence your cell phones. And as John asked me to say a second time, please silence your cell phones. And I'd like to close with a quote from Disarming Beauty. Father Carrón asks us, what is the mission of Christ? Christ did not come to solve the problems of the human person, but to educate the religious sense. That is, to reawaken the self, putting it in the right position for facing those problems. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our distinguished panelists, Archbishop Christophe, Pierre, Father Julián Carrón, and John Carr. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You may wonder why I was so insistent on turning off your cell phones. I told Father Carrón that at a previous gathering like this, I had silenced my cell phone, but not my iPad. And in the middle of the program, my son and daughter-in-law, my daughter-in-law is here, FaceTimed me from Atlanta. And so it was not this quiet little, ring, and then I should have, hi, Papa. Don't do what I did. Turn them all off. Thank you, Michelle, for those very gracious words. Mission and ministry and campus ministry here are among our most valuable and effective allies in putting forward and expressing the Catholic and Jesuit identity of Georgetown. We're honored to host this, and I want to express deep appreciation to our partners, the Fraternity of Communion and Liberation and Crossroads Cultural Center. Our gathering today, and I should say, I always forget this, if you want to join our conversation through Twitter, you can do so by hashtag Disarming Beauty. Isn't that creative? At the Catholic Social Teaching here at Georgetown. What we bring here together are two unique leaders. The Holy Father's representative to the United States, our church, our government, and the leader of a tremendous ecclesial movement around the world, Father Carrón. This, candidly, is an unusual gathering on Sunday afternoon in Washington. There is another religion in Washington. It's called pro-football. And a lot of people are worshiping at that altar at this very minute. So the turnout on this beautiful afternoon is a testament, I think, to the hunger we have for meaning, for faith, for witness, for beauty. For those of you who live in Washington, following sports can be a test of one's faith. We have gone decades without any of our teams winning a championship. In fact, most of them cannot win a playoff. So one of my questions, I'll save it till the end, is suffering redemptive? I'm really struck by the contrast between our gathering on this beautiful afternoon and so much of what goes on in Washington. If you were to describe the current reality of Washington, it would not be disarming beauty, it would be combative ugliness. It is ugly what is going on in politics and in community life. And we are armed to the teeth, maybe not with weapons, but with words, with partisanship, with ideology, with resentment, with anger. So it is not pretty. And so now we come together with two remarkable leaders to consider how we can live our faith in this time and context and use as a starting point this remarkable book. And I was asked by our colleague to say a word about the book. I think it was to make sure that I actually had read the book. It's a remarkable piece of work. As I understand it, you took 15 essays and presentations, re-edited, reformed it, brought it into a whole to see a call to live the good news in a way that invites people in instead of pushing people away. I'll have to be honest, I found it not to be an easy read. I had to read some of the sentences twice. In fact, I had to diagram some of the sentences. This is a deep thinker and an eloquent speaker. But it is a challenging, enriching, and encouraging book that transcends the polarization in our society and the divisions in our church. The book does not pick sides, but it brings down the walls and calls to look at who we are, where we stand, and where we are going. I was fascinated that the National Catholic Reporter and the National Catholic Register both loved the book. Crux and National Review both reviewed it positively. That does not always happen here, Father. It embraces art and culture in a way that is unusual, but it does not embrace the culture wars. It expresses faithfulness in a way that pulls us in instead of sends us away. It insists our faith is centered on a person, not an institution. It is discovered in an event, not an idea, expressed in generous witness, and offers encouragement, not judgment. And our faith is to be lived in everyday life, not in a protected enclave. It breaks through the stereotypes and the divisions. It is Catholic in every sense of the word. It's focused on Christ, faithful to his church and tradition, open to the world and its goodness, seeking to build bridges and calling for open eyes and arms, hearts and minds. This book, these two leaders, this afternoon's conversation, offers us a way to address key questions about faith and freedom, hope and beauty, love and life that lift us up and call us forward. So I want to begin with Father Carrón. As many of you know, he was born in 1950 in Spain. He became president of the Fraternity of Communion and Liberation in 2005, and he serves as professor of theology at the Catholic University of the Sacred Heart in Milan. In between his birth and his leadership, he lived an extraordinary life as a pastor, thinker, academic, and ecclesial leader. He was ordained a priest in 1975, had a degree in theology, had a distinguished academic career with posts in Madrid, Jerusalem, and Italy. I'm told that for many years, Father Giussani asked the Archbishop of Madrid to free you up to come and assist him in leading the movement. And for some reason, the Archbishop resisted that. I worked for the bishops for 25 years. I can understand that just a little. And then I'm told that Pope John Paul II weighed in, and for some reason, you became available.
Holy Spirit.
So you moved to Milan, you helped Father Giussani, and then after his death, you became president in 2005. I think almost everyone knows Communion and Liberation. It is a gift to the church. I believe it was Benedict XVI who called it a gift to the Holy Spirit, a movement that witnesses to the beauty of being Christian. It is present throughout the world. As in his role, he has not only served the movement, but he has served the church, serving on Vatican dicasteries, councils, participating in synod, He even spent a year here in Washington doing research and got an honorary degree at Catholic University, our sister university in the city. And then he wrote this book, first published in 2015, and now here in the United States in 2017 by another small, modest university. I believe it's called Notre Dame. So he is a teacher, a writer, a pastor, and a leader, but most of all, he is a believer, a witness to the event and the relationship at the heart of faithful witness to Jesus Christ. Father Carrón, I want to begin by asking a very general question. How did you come to be a priest? How did you come to join this movement? And how did you come to write this book? And if you were to describe it in brief terms, what is its essential message?
Thank you very much. I surprised myself when from I was a young boy, they decided to become a priest. I don't know why. It was a matter of fact that I had the desire to become a priest. And I had another possibility of studying in that moment in Spain. But anyway, I insisted to go to the seminary, and I went to the seminary when I was 10 years old. I did all my studies in the Seminary of Madrid and became priest, as you have said, in 1975. I developed all my life, pastoral life in Madrid, first at a pastoral caring two different parishes in one little town in Madrid. And afterwards, I was sent to study 1 year in Jerusalem, another in the United States for my PhD degree, and became teacher and principal of a school, high school, when I learned a lot about what is the nature of Christian faith. For this reason, in that particular moment, I met the movement, and it was a gift for me because I was struggling with the difficulty to enter in the relationship with the young people at the school. And I found in the Jusanist method of education a real gift, no? That made me adore this kind of job, no? And for years I devoted all my life to this kind of job that was education in high school. And so I met Giussani when I was priest from 10 years, and I understood that it was real crucial for my development of faith, not only for pastoral reason, but for answering to my personal question and to understand better what is Christian life lived in the real context we were facing in that moment in the church and in the world, no? Particularly in Spain. And I always thank Giussani because he helped me to the possibility, offered me the possibility of doing a human journey in my faith. I had received the faith in the seminary, but when I started to understand what is about faith is when I verified this faith in the reality, following Giussani's method that offered me the possibility of reaching a certainty that I didn't have before. No, and this is why
And then you became the leader of the movement after his death.
This is a part of the mystery.
How
I don't
did
know
you?
how.
I believe we call that grace. And you wrote this book, and then you called it Disarming Beauty, which is a paradoxical title. Why? What is disarming and what is beauty?
Disarming, in Italian, it was a fight, no? Leaders in English countries about what is the real translation of Italian title. In Italian is unarmed beauty or disarmed beauty, but in English can be both of them. Not only that the truth doesn't need another power than the power intrinsic of beauty, but at the same time, this beauty had the possibility of disarm the other because it's another way of putting faith not only like a weapon or a content to use against somebody, but a possibility of offering a beauty that is so attractive that we remain speechless before the beauty. No, and in such a way, the disarmed beauty is at the same time disarming beauty. Mm-hmm. No, in both senses. So this is like a program because it's in a multicultural environment and world, global society, we are living our faith. We can fight against the other because of the difference of our faith, or we can testify the beauty of Christian faith in a multicultural environment. And this is like a program, mm-hmm. no? Of a way of living faith in this particular historical moment.
Mm-hmm. Archbishop Father Carrón has given many interviews, but one of the interviews in the United States, and one of the interviews he said, if you don't think Francis is the cure, you don't grasp the disease. Before I ask you what you think he was talking about, I want to introduce you to this audience. 18 months ago, you were chosen by Pope Francis to be Papal Nuncio to the United States, both our church, our people, and our government. You were born in France. You've served in many places around the world. I was struck by the fact that you were educated in Madagascar, France, and Morocco. You got your seminary training in France. You served in the military. He was a parish priest. He was ordained in 1970. He has a master's in theology and a doctorate in canon law. You joined the diplomatic corps of the Holy See in 1977. So he has served as a papal diplomat in New Zealand, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Cuba, Brazil, and at the United Nations in Geneva. And that was before he was named an archbishop in 1995, when then the Holy Father asked you to become Apostolic Nuncio to Haiti. No challenges there. Papal representative to Uganda, and then the Papal Nuncio to Mexico. And then Pope Francis asked you to serve as his representative to the United States. We've been honored to have Archbishop Pierre here at Georgetown. He was on this very stage, I believe, last March for our discussion of the Francis factor. After 4 years, you were able to participate in part of a dialogue convening we had with centers like ours from across the country, with Cardinal Turkson and others from the Vatican. What I have seen is he is a diplomat, yes, and I've tried to get him in trouble without success by the questions I've asked, but he is a diplomat with the pastor's heart. He is a leader who affirms the diversity and the vitality of the Church in the United States, but also challenges us to understand and embrace the mission and message of Pope Francis. I used to work for the Bishops' Conference, as Michelle mentioned, and I read very carefully your presentation, the bishops. And I think you were talking to them, but you were also talking to us when you said, to evangelize more effectively, Pope Francis calls the whole church to listen more. Do we listen, even to those with whom we disagree, so that we might propose the essentials of the gospel in a more persuasive, life-changing way? So I go back to what Father Carrón told, I believe it was Crux. If you don't think Francis is the cure, you don't grasp the disease. How do Pope Francis' strong words and humble ways match up to the call for disarming beauty that Father Carrón has outlined?
You know, we have come here to sell a book.
I thought you were a diplomat.
So I will sell it. But not just to sell a book and to keep it, you know, on the shelf, as usually you do, but to read it. I tell you, I've suffered a lot. I think, I've gained my redemption. I've suffered a lot in reading this book. You know, some months ago, I was asked to have this kind of exercise. I don't really like it, you know, because it's, I know that it is very demanding to enter into the, you know, I've read a lot of books of Monsignor Giussani during my life. And I have always suffered reading Giussani because it's not easy. And in some way, I would say Carrón is a good disciple of Giussani. But, you know, the suffering is worthwhile. This is why I encourage you to read it and to read it carefully. I will tell you, you know, just as a witness, because tonight we shall speak a lot about witness, because this is all this book is all about, you know, especially in today's time. We are witnesses of the disarming beauty. That's basically what, you know, in 2 or 3 words, this is the book. But now you have to read it. Yeah? So, you know, I start to read it, and it was, I had 2 copies, 1 copy in Spanish and 1 in Italian. So I happened to take in Italian, I read it in Italian. And you know, I usually read my books in planes, because I don't have time much when I am not in planes. But you know, I'm spending a lot of time in planes all around the country. So I read the book first but when I finished, I said, well, yes. Then you had the translation in English. And the time of this encounter was getting near, a few weeks ago. So I said, now I should read it back again in English. And I just finished it, by the way, to read it a few days ago when I was coming back from Alaska. You know, I had 8 hours plane, so more or less I managed to. But, you know, so, okay, do the same, please. Read the book. Huh? And I will tell you why. You know, there are many elements in the books which are very, very important because they touch our lives. And this is the reason why I actually like the book. It has touched my life. In the same way, of course, you will tell me that I am the representative of the Holy Father, so I will sell the Pope also, you know, here to you, with you. But no, it's not the reason. It's that, you know, really, while I was reading the book, I thought, but this is exactly a book which is helping us to understand Pope Francis. It actually gives us theological and pastoral reasons and psychological and philosophical reasons to understand Pope Francis. And I thought this is very urgent because we have to recognize that many people do not understand Pope Francis today. And if you don't understand Pope Francis, you cannot love him. If you have not encountered Pope Francis, you cannot love Pope Francis, and you cannot follow him. And we have all a duty, you know, if we are Catholics. I suppose we are all Catholics here. Maybe not all, but you know, if we are Catholics, you know, to understand our leader and to follow him. And actually, this book is a good method and I will tell you why. First and foremost, you know, I arrived in Mexico about 10 years ago. That was a time of a very important meeting of the South American bishops in Aparecida. You know, Aparecida is a sanctuary of Our Lady, the main sanctuary of Our Lady of Brazil. So this is the 5th conference of Latin American bishops. And during this, I was just appointed Nuncio to Mexico. I arrived actually on the last day of the meeting. So I saw the bishops coming back from Aparecida, and they received me in Mexico. And they were speaking about this Aparecida. You know that the South American continent has had a very interesting, challenging history during the last century. With fifth big meetings, you know the whole history of Medellin, Puebla, the fort in Santo Domingo, etc. And you know the story of the option for the poor in Medellin, the theology of liberation, all the conflicts, and so forth. You know, I would say that from our observatory here in the United States, I think we see what's going on in South America from very far. And maybe we do not really fully understand what's going on. So I had the privilege to work in 4 countries of South America over the last few years. And I've seen, you know, the impact of this interesting history precisely of a church which works together, thinks together, and tries to respond to the challenges of the time. And the challenges of the time are precisely, you know, in which society we live and what we should offer as a church to evangelize this world, not the worlds of yesterday, not the worlds of tomorrow, this world, and to offer, you know, the joy of the gospel, as Pope Francis says, to this world, and to offer solutions, not to resolve the problems, I think we heard it already, but to help people to be disciples of Jesus inside this reality and to live as disciples. As they say, it means that we have to listen to the gospel and to apply it to the reality. So this is what the church in South America tried to do according to the circumstances. But when I read, and that was my first reading when I arrived 10 years ago in Mexico, I read the final document of Aparecida. I said, my God, but this is extraordinary. You know, you had pastors, not psychologists, not technicians, not a specialist of organization of pastorals, not bureaucrats of the church. No. Pastors. People concerned by the people and concerned by the evangelization of people. How to announce the gospel. And so this pastor said, you know, during this meeting, you know, we are concerned because what we actually observe that we, as pastors, our priests, our teachers, our professors, and particularly the parents, have a great difficulty to transmit the faith. In this particular context, you know, we come from a world where the culture, especially in South America, was so in touch with the faith that the transmission of the faith and the values related to the faith, you know, the human values, were actually transmitted normally. It means that somebody born in Mexico, for example, would become quite naturally a Christian through the parish, the family, the school, the society at work. It doesn't mean that all would be practicing Catholic. No, it doesn't mean that we would not have violence in Mexico. No. It would not mean that we would not have corruption all over the place, even among the Catholics, even inside the church. But the transmission was quite a natural process. And suddenly, that's what the pastors of South America said in Aparecida. Yeah? Suddenly, we realized that there is a kind of breakdown of communication, and particularly inside the family. And when I say that to parents, they said, yes, it's good. I cannot transmit, I cannot offer to my children, what I believe. Because we live in a world where I am not the only master of the game. There are many others, and they listen to other sources. And they actually say, Papa, you are actually saying that, but I have other information. I have my viewpoint. The girl or the boy of 15 years old, he says that, and in some way the parents don't know what to say. So in front of this situation, the bishop said, "This is a kind of, we are living in a new world." They spoke about, in Spanish, cambio de época, change of epoch, change of time. And they try to analyze it, to say what's going on. We are living in a new kind of situations, a globalized world. There is a kind, and Carrón, you say that, in your book, kind of collapse of evidences. I think it's very interesting, Things which before apparently were evident for everybody, and you would accept them, because of their inner evidence, now are not evidence anymore. And even those who are supposed to offer to the young people this evidence, they have doubts. Even the parents now, today, they say, well, should I say that to my child? The world today tells me that marriage, should be between a man and a woman. But people say that perhaps marriage is not just between a man and a woman. You are a man by birth. No, maybe today, we could perhaps, there is a way of choosing if I am a man or a woman. It's just a small example, but it's very crucial. And in all areas of life, this evidence are crumbling. And we don't know how to transmit that. So the bishop said, we are pastors. We have, in this particular world, to announce the gospel. Before we used to announce it, with the dynamism of the society, the culture. But today, no. So what should we do? What should we do? Because we are the church. And the church, what is the church, by the way? The church is the place chosen by Christ to continue his mission of announcing the gospel. This is basically that. And the church, we are the church. So we have, in this new context, to reinvent the church so that the church today may be able to announce the good news of the gospel in this particular context. This is what the bishops tried to offer in Aparecida. So if you allow me, I would like just a few minutes to finish the story, because he has always been very impatient with me, no? But among these people, among these bishops, there were one in particular called Bergoglio. I don't know if you heard about him, And actually he became the one who organized the bishops to offer a kind of answer to this challenge. And the document of Aparecida, the final document, was coordinated by himself. The Providence wanted, the Holy Spirit wanted that a few years later, this Bergoglio became the Pope. And this document, which, by the way, was totally ignored in North America. Nobody, even the bishops did not know about it, because this has happened in a small corner of South America, imagine, far away. We are different. We are different. We don't understand what's going on over there. And suddenly, the same Bergoglio, Pope Francis, offers us Evangelii Gaudium, which is the copy of Aparecida. Imagine. So now it becomes the guideline of the church. And what is this guideline saying? This guideline is saying that today, in this new world, and we have to analyze it, but the book gives us a lot of interesting elements. I have no time to go through that. We have to offer to the world Jesus. Es decir, we have to offer to this world the possibility of an encounter with Christ. This encounter with Christ was in some way provided in another context in a different way. Today, we have to provide this encounter. And the whole book, and this is why I thank you for that, the whole book is precisely a kind of deep, very subtle, very interesting analysis about the necessity for us to be, because we are the church. The church is not outside ourselves. The necessity for us to provide to this new world the possibility of an encounter with Christ. And if we don't do that, it will not happen. Because the encounter with Christ necessarily goes through the church. But now, and maybe I will leave Carrón to respond to that question. I would like to ask, because from that, I ask myself a lot of questions. Have I personally encountered Christ? And my answer is yes. I suppose also for you. But I think it's not enough to say yes like that, How did you encounter Christ? When? How? What is your actual experience of Christ? Thinking about that, I realized that all along my life, Christ, through the church, my family, my various experience of churches, have exerted a deep attraction on me. Because the figure of Christ, through the church, because we should always say that, Christ is not an idea. It's not a concept outside the reality. It has been offered to me through an experience. And this experience of Christ through the church, which has touched me so deeply, has transformed my life in a way that, my life could not be understood, could not be coherent, could not have any meaning. And when I speak about meaning, I am at the heart of the book of Carrón, because basically it speaks about the meaning of life. And I think my life has a meaning because of my encounter with Christ, but also because of my encounter with all the people in the church, in the world, which have helped me to make an encounter with Christ. This is the question of meaning. In a context where a lot of people, and particularly young people, and this is the first part of your book, in a context where many young people today have not found the meaning of their own life. And because perhaps also of the context of the society, but also because nobody has been offering to them the possibility to find a meaning to their life. The meaning means that life is not ended here. There is something more. There is a transcendental dimension. There is an aspiration, but also there is somebody who is coming to give a definitive meaning to our life. Of course, for us, the encounter with Christ. But, so I'm sorry to monopolize the conversation and to explain you all the books, and now you have understood.
I think you ought to bring the Nuncio with you everywhere. He is an he is an articulator of Bergoglio and Apostolic, but he also is an eloquent articulator of Carrón. He makes the case that you provide the foundation for Pope Francis' words, powerful words, in humble ways. When you said, if you don't think Francis is the answer, then you don't know the disease. What were you talking about?
That I think that one of the reasons because Pope Francis is misunderstood, or at least not completely understood, and many people had some kind of difficulty with him, is because they don't understand what is the real nature of the crisis we are dealing with. Because if we treat the cancer like a flu, no, you can think that the cancer can be treated with an aspirin, but the aspirin is too light to defeat the cancer. If you understand what is the nature of the cancer, you need to apply another kind of medicine. So it's related. No? The gospel today, no? Is a real image in the parable of the gospel. They were invited, most of the people, to the banquet. But many of the invited people don't realize what is the nature of their own needs. And they thought that they could have the answer in their business or in the marriage or their land that they have bought. But it was not enough. Only the poor people, that means people who has the real awareness of the need, they accepted to be invited. So we can see in the gospel, it's always the same. It's not only the talk we are doing now. It's in the gospel. Many of people that met Jesus didn't understand what is the nature of their own needs, and for this reason, they didn't realize what is the importance of the presence of Christ. They think that they had to do a lot of things, a lot of practice. For instance, the dominant thinkers of that time, that the Pharisees, they had a lot of things to do. So it is most important to follow these kind of rules to heal the human situation than to accept the medicine that Jesus was offering in that moment. Only the real sick people recognize what is the nature of the medicine that Christ was providing them.
And how does Francis, the Archbishop, talked about our inability to communicate the gospel, the joy of the gospel. How does Francis understand the disease and communicate the joy of the gospel?
Like Jesus. Because Jesus, instead of doing a lot of reflection, offered people signs through which they could understand what is the answer, the pardon of their sins, and the way of looking at them to make them recover their own dignity as a human being, the blessing them with a companionship that may then feel at home with him. Why people like publicans that were sinners decided to go with him, to lunch with him? Why? Because within they realized that they were themselves. They can embrace themselves. So, in such a gesture that everybody could understand at this moment, Jesus offered them. And when he spoke about beatitude, he said, they are blessed people, and who are so humble, so open, so aware of their own poverty, that are open to this kind of proposal, to this kind of offering. And this mix of this and words that could be understand for everybody, would be understood for everybody, was easy for them. Like the Pope now. If the Pope goes to some place, in Lampedusa, everybody can understand what it's about. And he afterwards explained in a word what is the meaning of this. People can understand. Many of them maybe don't read the book or the speech, but they have in their own eyes that the Pope decided to go to Lampedusa. It's a gesture that speaks by itself.
We have had a number of sessions. The Archbishop was a part of a wonderful conversation about the way in which Pope Francis is shaping our understanding of our lives, our vocation. And we've had great theologians, we've had journalists, we've had religious leaders, we've had nuncios, and my daughter came. I thought you were a diplomat. My daughter came to several of these, one of the young people that doesn't listen to her parents, like you described, sort of. And I said, what did you think of all that? Those profound thoughts and the great theologians and the fancy politicians. She said, I like the woman who said, he walks and talks and acts like Jesus. That's why he's authentic. I was struck by your comment about how we in North America paid little attention to opera recita. And I think that's true. And that we have our own change of epochs. We have our own transformation of time and vocation to be the disarming beauty. Can you talk, after now a year and a half here, what are the assets, the strengths the Church in the United States brings to this task? And what are the tests for us? What are the challenges for us you've seen as you've moved around the country?
Well, I'm always resistant to make this kind of global visions, but, a little bit in the follow-up of what you say, actually in your book you have wonderful, like Monsignor Giussani, wonderful words about these various encounters of Jesus with people. I think this is the basic of the gospel. And this is the actual answer. Pope Francis is somebody who wants us to meet the people and to accompany them. I think this is the key of all the problems, the discussions about, the question of marriage and so forth, Amoris Laetitia. So, above all these controversies, which are normal, controversies are normal. We have to discuss, we have to deepen, we have to understand. But the Holy Father, seeing the world as it is today, this is why I think he's so close to what you say, and what you say is helping us to understand him, in front of this world, we need really to go back to the basis and to help people who are disinterested. Most of the young people today, they said, what, and the world today does not help them, to look after the real meaning of their life, because this is what it is all about, and a life without meaning is dull. And people, we don't know where to go and where we are going from. I think this is our duty, to offer them. So the Holy Father knows that. He knows that very deeply because he has experienced that. So he wants the church to be the church, not just an organization, not just a cultural, edifice, defending values. The values are very good, He wants the church to be the company of the witness of Jesus, who could meet people and help the people to have a personal encounter with Jesus, because this is the only way for the people
to save the values.
Exactly. To save the values, exactly. But sometimes, we think that we will save the world if we keep values. The values will come as a consequence of an encounter. I don't say the values are bad. No, we have to save them. But the priority for us as a church is to encounter the people, And this is what will free the people, will help them to rediscover all the values, their freedom, their reason, everything which is good in our life. So in a world where there is difficulty for the young people, this is the priority. And the Pope wants us to be at the service of that, So Pope Francis, for this reason, Pope Francis is unsettling us. I remember when I was in Mexico 2 years ago, at the cathedral, the Holy Father made a very strong speech to the bishops, as he always does. The first people to be hit, by Pope Francis are the bishops, then the priest, yeah, then eventually the lay people. But I remember it was a strong speech, very good, strong, as he always does. But there were some people. He said, the Pope does not understand that we are good. Mm-hmm. Why is he saying that to us? We are the best. We have done that. I thought about, these Pharisees in front of the public and say, Lord, look, I give that. So I am a very missionary. We have kept the faith. We have kept the values. So probably, a journalist said, probably, the Holy Father was not well informed by, about the situation in Mexico. And another journalist wrote, who misinformed the Holy Father? The Nuncio. Imagine, the Pope is not well informed. The Pope is well informed, precisely, and he wants, this is why there is so much provocation today. The provocation is not just for fun. The provocation is just to help us to rediscover what we have to do as a church. And the church as only function, to help people to make a personal encounter with Christ. And if we don't do that, we fail. Mm-hmm. We are a different thing. Then the consequences will be to rebuild the world with values. But there is also a very important, very interesting reflection which I liked, and you use some words of Pope Benedict XVI, and this is fundamental, it's a kind of very reading, Benedict XVI had a wonderful role, during his pontificate to help us precisely to understand the depth and the nature of the crisis we live in today, and, it goes back, to the Reformation when, the whole world was Christians, Catholic, and suddenly, there is a kind of breakdown, the separation, the Protestant Catholics, and people started to fight the first wars of religion, and the wars of religions which continue today were about ideology in the name of religion. you are Protestant because you are German, you are Catholic because you are French, so and then there was with all the Enlightenment, and the Kant and company, people said, well, how could you now find a new world where everybody is in agreement? So we should cut the values from their source, because all values come from religion, from the gospel. The sense, the meaning of person, the respect of human life, and so forth and so forth. The freedom and so Kant said, well, we cannot. That was a time where still, everybody thought that, these values are self-evident. So there was no need to rely them, to attach them to their source. But step by step, during the last 2, 3, 4 centuries, these values have been separated from their source. And actually, these values have disappeared. Because, if the values have no roots, they become ideology. And the ideology is manipulated. And there are wars of ideology. So, for example, the right to life, but also the right to kill. 2 rights? Okay.
I have lots more questions, but this is the time for your questions. So we have 2 microphones here, and if you would approach the microphone, identify yourself. Please put your question in the form of a question, and we'll try and respond. Anyone? If not, I'll go back to my questions. Please go to the microphone.
Hi, my name is Tom Tobin. I graduated from Georgetown many years ago, and today I picked up the student paper, and I was just curious, what are students thinking now? And I was a little disappointed, actually. It seemed like here, just like in most places, there's a poverty of discourse in the sense of very strong ideology, very difficulty in understanding what the different suppositions might be on the other side. Father Carrón, in your book, you write a good deal about reason and the broadening of reason and a different concept of reason. What do you think your understanding of reason could contribute to this, what we often have as a kind of ideological stalemate at universities and in many places?
This is an important issue because how can we understand what is reason? Reason starts from our relationship with the reality.
Speak up a little louder.
Reason, the concept of reason starts from our relationship with the reality. I always remember one moment in my period of teacher in a high school. And I went with my student to the planetarium of Madrid. And everybody was surprised, struck by the beauty of the stars and saw the firmament and the reality. And afterwards, I had by chance a lesson with them. And I started to speak about our visit to the planetarium. And I asked them what was surprising in the planetarium. And they started to ask me a lot of questions, not how many stars, because they have been provided with this data. Who is the author of this planetarium? What is the meaning? We can use this reality in whatever way we decide, or there is some kind of relationship that we need to respect. All questions that many times in school are not provided because reason is only used as a measure of the reality. We offer what we can provide with experiment, but the reason is not only this one. They need an answer to all these questions. For this reason, Paul Benedict said that if we don't enlarge, make abroad our reason, we can understand this kind of issue. And it's like if you sometimes offered a gift to your son with the new devices, and you start to offer them all the explanation about technical issues, or what is the dimension of the device, what is the instrument, what is the part of the device. In a moment, after a while, he is fed up of your explanation and don't follow you, because if you don't offer the meaning of the device, it's not interesting.
Mm-hmm. Other questions? Can I build off that question about ideology? Both of you, in your work, in your ministry, in your book, in your presentation to the Bishops' Conference, talked about moving beyond the divisions, the ideological conflict in our church. In some ways, your approach, your movement transcends those divisions, and you remind us that our faith is a whole. It's not a menu to be chosen from. How does Francis, how does Disarming Beauty guide us in overcoming the divisions and building bridges between the factions? The Holy Father is not a chaplain to a faction. Your movement does not belong in a corner of the church. You cross the boundaries. How do we, people in this room and beyond, help us move towards greater unity in proclaiming the joy of the gospel? Let's start with you, Father.
Last week, I made a lot of meetings around the country. And in one of them, a member of a university where we were talking about this book said, Father Jose, we have a lot of meetings like that about dialogue. We are interested in dialogue. And we invited a lot of people. I'm a Muslim, you are Baptist, and Catholic. And everyone has his own statement about it. But there is no dialogue. The ideology cannot meet people. Instead, he said, I have seen this evening in Houston, in this university, what is the dialogue about? Because there were two Baptists, a Muslim, a Catholic, and a priest, a Catholic priest. And there were a dialogue between people, not about their own ideology.
So, dialogue. You have raised this question with the bishops and with the church. How do we build bridges instead of walls in our family of faith?
Well, we are all always tempted by ideas which becomes, well, not to repeat the same word always, but become ideology in the sense that, we defend an idea, and we identify with this idea to the point that we will fight against an idea which is different. This is what happens actually at Aparecida. It's interesting. You know that when in Puebla and Medellin some years ago in South America, the bishops in their various conferences, took this deep option for the poor. This was an intuition coming from the gospel. We cannot be Christians if we are not give not priority to the poor, and because this is the gospel, as you said, the Beatitudes. So, but very soon, these options of the poor became ideology. and was quite in some way recuperated by some others' ideology, because that was the time of Marxism. You know, Marxism was actually the next plus ultra. You know, you had to be Marxist in order to understand the reality. To understand the reality, you needed an ideology. But the Pope tells us that you know, the reality cannot be understood by an ideology, but you know, from the reality itself. So in Aparecida, you know, when people were preparing, you know, I followed that very carefully. When preparing for Aparecida, they were all afraid to lose their viewpoint. So people from, maybe let's put another category, left, they said we should keep these ideas, you know, this, and the people from the right, we should eliminate these ideas, you know. And actually, before Aparecida, everybody was preparing for a war. And suddenly, in Aparecida, there was no war. Why? Because people, the bishops, decided to look at the reality as it is, in a spirit of communion. And they actually produced, you know, a document which was very positive and which was well beyond these differences between left and right, which at times are for us like a prison. You know, we easily characterize a person, well, this is he's the right wing, so that, you know, I don't talk to him. He's a left wing, we should eliminate him. You know, this is basically what we have done in the church and in the society, by the way. You know, and this is a cancer, as you say, you know. Mm-hmm. So I think precisely we have, the Holy Father is, you know, the Holy Father speaks about the poor. People accuse him to be a Marxist, you know. That's, you know, or maybe he speaks about something else, he's accused to be, you know, but the medicine is precisely that, you know. The medicine is to go back to the reality. And the reality is the crisis. And the difficulty that people find, you know, to find meaning in their life. And that we have, because we have met Christ, and we have a kind of answer, which it is not ideological, it's an encounter. And we have to propose the encounter. And if we have not encountered, it's exactly, you know, you cannot love a person if you have not fallen in love with that person. And you will try to marry this person, but if you have not fallen with that person, your marriage will collapse.
Question.
Yes, hi, I'm Jane Malash. I actually work in the arts here in Washington, so I'm a great lover of beauty, particularly visual beauty. And I've been a deep and long reader of Luigi Giussani. There's not a time that when I'm about to write about art and beauty, I turn to the religious sense. I have not yet read your book, Father Carrón, but I came here because I was really intrigued by the title. And I feel like we really haven't made this connection between what is beauty, how do we define beauty, what does it have to do with my faith? Who cares if something's beautiful if I don't believe in anything? Tell me, in your book, why should I read your book? What is there for me that I can look to that is going to send me deeper into Christ, deeper into the church, somewhere in a trajectory that's going to be beautiful? I'd like to hear you respond to that.
Well, one reason is because the Pope's representative told you. But
there is no other introduction or invitation to read about that testimony, because the difficulty to explain something is that we are looking for an explanation, and many times we can understand the things only with an explanation. No, it's a possibility. It's an invitation what we are doing this afternoon here. No, and if something what you have listened this afternoon is applied with something that is interesting for you, this is the good invitation. This is the best invitation to read it. And at the end, you can write me and say, I don't agree with you, I agree, or I have some remark to offer you. Because I was always surprised by the method that God used for introducing to the reality. Instead of offering a speech about love, make us come to the world in a family, where we can experience what love is about, or make us falling in love with somebody. Because only in our own experience can we understand what is the explanation of love or about what love is about. So we can understand only by experience. And for this reason, this is the only way of overcoming ideology, because the experience break shatter of the ideology, because the reality is always greater than all our missions or our ideology. And this is an invitation. We can follow freely or we can refuse it. But it is an invitation to read the book and to see is in this book you can understand what is the beauty of reasoning in some way, of use of reason, of use of freedom, of using what is about family, using reason in such a way, what is the meaning of Christ dealing with all the issues that we are entrapped many times in our life. And you can see this is something that can be useful for you for understanding better what is about the crisis.
We're going to have to move on, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Make it short.
I'm going to make it brief. I'm Carmen. I'm from Costa Rica. I arrived in the United States in 1990, met CL, and found Don Giussani very difficult, which I was very happy to hear that very intelligent and wise people like you agree. I'm just going to tell you the following. I did not do diagrams, or I did not read it in two languages. I'm using a code, color code, because my friend said, but you are underlining everything. And I say, yes, everything is very important. So I just thank you, Father Carrón, from the bottom of my heart for continuing to teach me. And my question was your advice to keep me in front of reality more, because I know that I many times don't stay there, but that was the question. What advice you give me?
Let me just add this and turn this into the final question. I'm just overwhelmed by the power and the eloquence and the depth of this conversation. The second thing I'm overwhelmed by is the youth and diversity of this audience. We are three of the older people in this room. We are three men in a room that's a majority women. What advice, was the question, do you have for young people, for young men and women trying to live their faith in their daily life, trying in a period where in some ways the culture seems to overwhelm us, and in other ways the divisions in our family of faith seem to paralyze us? Briefly, but directly, what advice do you have for young men and women, particularly lay people, about how they can be disarming beauty in this time? And we'll start with the Nuncio.
This is the hardest question. I don't pretend to have the answer, to be honest with you. You know, I think I'm stuck by the question of the lady. Yeah, you know, I think beauty, you are attracted. The key word is attraction. You know, if there is a beautiful work of art, you are attracted by it. But maybe you are not totally, but perhaps because you have not yet been educated. There is a dimension of education, which is very important in the book of Father Carrón. You know? So because precisely, and maybe this is the answer, you know, to your questions. Because, you know, we live in a world which has been separated with meaning and with transcendence and with God, from God, you know. And, you know, as you said, you know, we only give the recipe to make a car. but you don't know the meaning of the object, you know. So maybe there is a lack of education, and our education. This is also a question about the gentleman who asked us about university, you know. If the educators, the masters, the professors, the parents, the priests, whoever have a task of education, are actually reducing their education to explain how it works and not why it works and where we are going. And actually, you know, even the most beautiful work of art will not be perceived by the person, by the subject, you know. And so I think the challenge is precisely that, you know, to help to touch the heart of the people. As Jesus said, Zacchaeus was totally outside the reality until the day he met Jesus. And this is the Samaritan lady, you know, on the well of Jacob, you know, she was living in a different world. And suddenly she meets somebody who opened her heart, and she discovers that she's full of desire for the truth, for the beauty, for the thing. And this beauty was hidden. So what are we doing with education? And maybe the first, the main, I discovered that, you know, during my years in the contact with Giussani. Giussani has been the greater educator, but he has also offered us a method for education. And the method of education, you know, in university, I spent many years in university. Everybody has his own idea of education. And you know, professors, they are so jealous about their own theory about education that they don't listen to others. I think that, I do that, you know.
Oh, not here.
No. But you know, at the end of it, you know what it is? You know, we have to, the real educator is the person who, first of all, realize an encounter with the other. And so this is what Jesus did. And from that, he was able, actually, they want us to go, no?
Thank you. That, very subtle, didn't you think? Father. No.
As summary, the advice is to love themselves, to love their own life, because only if they are the desire to love themselves, they would need something that can answer to their desires and to their needs. Only in such a way they can identify where Christ is and how Christ is the only who can save her own desires of fullness and plenitude.
I have a wonderful summary, which I will not share with you. But I do want to share some previews of some coming attractions. Somebody said, where do we have reason and dialogue, and how do we bridge the ideologies? In some ways, you're talking about the mission of the initiative, and I just wanted to call attention to some upcoming. We are working with the Office of Mission and Ministry, and we're having 2 Dahlgren dialogues on November 2nd on the moral questions around nuclear arms and North Korea with former Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel, Stephen Kolecki from the U.S. Catholic Bishops' Conference, Marianne Kuzmano-Love, perhaps others. On November 13th, we're having, I think, a very powerful discussion about the moral and religious task to confront racism in our own hearts and in our nation with John Lewis of the Congress, a civil rights icon, Archbishop Wilton Gregory, the senior African-American bishop, Reverend Jim Wallace, an evangelical leader, and Dr. Marcia Chatelain, who was a leader in the effort to address slavery and its implications here at Georgetown. And then on November 16th, I'm sure you all know this, this is the 50th anniversary of the death of John Courtney Murray, who was the great Jesuit writer and teacher on church and state, religion and politics. And we're going to have a session that evening on faith, common good and democracy in a time of President Trump and Pope Francis. We think it'll be a very interesting conversation. The last thing I will say before introducing our colleague Barbara will be that our initiative convenes young people to reflect on how their faith and the principles of Catholic social teaching impact their lives and their work. 4 or 5 times a year, downtown, on Capitol Hill, it is a chance to remind us why we have this faith and what difference it can make in public life, and we would encourage each of you to be a part of that and to invite others. As was said earlier, grab our brochure, send us an email. And now I would like to invite Barbara, our colleague, to come up and bring our session to a close.
Thank you. I'm the Associate Director of Crossroads Cultural Center, which together with the Fraternity of Communion and Liberation and the Initiative on Catholic Social Thought are co-sponsors of tonight's event. I just want to give you some indications of how you can continue the conversation. Crossroads Cultural Center is the volunteer work of some members of Communion and Liberation who are interested in bringing the life and intelligence of faith into dialogue with our contemporary culture. And we take for our motto St. Paul's dictum to test everything and retain what is good. Toward that end, we sponsor lectures, panel discussions, artistic presentations throughout the year, and our next event will be a screening of Wise Blood, the classic film based on the novel by Flannery O'Connor, followed by a discussion with the screenwriter and the producer, Michael Fitzgerald, at the American Film Institute, the AFI Silver Theater in Silver Spring, Maryland. So please stop by the desk outside for more information and to sign up for our mailing list and to learn more about our movement, Communion and Liberation. Father Carrón's book, Disarming Beauty, is also available outside for a suggested donation of $25, and they accept credit cards. I'd like to thank a number of people before we leave tonight. Michelle from Campus Ministry, thank you very much. Father Carrón, of course, and Archbishop Pierre, thank you for your remarks, and of course John Carr and the Institute here on Catholic Social Thought for making us feel very much at home. There are a number of other people, Hunter and Nicolo, who are CST fellows, and Samuel, who is a student worker here. There's also Letizia Mariani, Winnie Arzu, and Father Medina, who are Communion and Liberation, and we thank them all for helping out with tonight's event. You're all invited to join us for a post-event reception at the Riggs Library. There's the Riggs Library is, well, it's better just to stop at the desk and get the handout. It's past the chapel that we had Mass in. If any of you are here at Mass, but you can get one of these. So please join us. And again, thank you very much all for coming.
Join me in thanking